Kira Veltos pressed her hands against the communication console as another explosion shook the building. The lights flickered above her head, and dust fell from the ceiling. She had been trying to send a message to the stars for 3 hours now, but the alien ships kept destroying their transmission towers. The Vallani people had never seen war before. They were farmers and teachers, builders and artists. Their world was green and peaceful, with rolling hills covered in golden crops and crystal-clear rivers. Children played in gardens while their parents worked the fields. Nobody carried weapons because nobody needed them. That was before the gray ships came from the sky. Kira wiped sweat from her forehead and tried again. The radio crackled with static, but she could hear something beyond the noise. Space was big, but maybe someone out there would listen. Maybe someone would care about a small farming world that had never hurt anyone. "Come on," she whispered to the machine. "Please work." Outside the communication center, she could see the alien soldiers marching through the streets. They were tall and covered in dark metal armor. Their faces were hidden behind masks, but their red eyes glowed like angry stars. The Vallani people ran from them, carrying their children and crying. The aliens called themselves the Vorthak Empire. They had landed 2 days ago with a simple message: surrender or die. When the Vallani leaders asked why, the Vorthak captain had laughed. They wanted workers for their mines on distant worlds. The Vallani would make good slaves because they were strong from farm work, but too gentle to fight back. Kira's friend Bren had been captured that morning while trying to help elderly people escape. She watched through the window as Vorthak soldiers loaded him and dozens of others into metal cages. His eyes met hers for a moment before the transport ship flew away. She knew she would never see him again. The radio suddenly cleared, and Kira heard the beautiful sound of an open channel. Her heart jumped with hope. She grabbed the microphone and took a deep breath. "This is Vallani Prime calling anyone who can hear this message," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We are a peaceful world in the Outer Rim. We grow food and make art. We have never hurt anyone. But aliens called the Vorthak Empire are attacking us. They want to make us slaves. We have no weapons and no soldiers. Please, if anyone out there can help us, we are sending our location with this message. We just want to live in peace." She repeated the message 5 times, then added their planet's coordinates. As she finished, a Vorthak patrol ship flew over the building, its weapons charged with a low humming sound that made her teeth hurt. "Please," she said one last time into the radio. "Someone help us." The building exploded around her. Kira woke up buried under pieces of concrete and twisted metal. Her left arm hurt badly and blood ran down her face. She could hear voices speaking in the harsh Vorthak language somewhere above her. Carefully, very carefully, she crawled deeper into the ruins until she found a small space where she could hide. Through a crack in the rubble, she could see Vorthak soldiers checking the destroyed equipment. One of them kicked at the broken radio and said something that made the others laugh. They thought it was funny that the peaceful farmers had tried to call for help. After the soldiers left, Kira managed to crawl out of the building. The city around her was burning. Vorthak ships flew overhead like metal vultures, their weapons destroying anything that looked important. In the distance, she could see their massive mothership hanging in the sky like a dark moon. She limped through the empty streets looking for other survivors. Most of the buildings were damaged or destroyed. The beautiful gardens were trampled flat. The crystal rivers ran red with ash and debris. Near the city center, she found a group of Vallani hiding in the basement of an old school. There were maybe 30 people, including some children who cried quietly in their parents' arms. An elderly man named Jorik was trying to treat the wounded with supplies from a first aid kit. "Did you send the message?" asked a young farmer named Dex. His hands were covered in bandages from trying to fight the Vorthak with farm tools. "I sent it," Kira said, "but I don't know if anyone heard it before they destroyed the transmitter." An old woman named Mira shook her head sadly. The galaxy is a big place. Most worlds have their own problems. Why would they risk their lives for strangers? Because it's the right thing to do, said a small voice. Everyone turned to look at Tali, a little girl no older than 10. My teacher said that good people help each other, even when it's hard. The adults looked at each other with tired eyes. They wanted to believe her, but hope was a dangerous thing when death walked the streets above them. On the third day, Captain Ray's Vorthak stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked down at the burning world below. The conquest was going, exactly as planned. The Villani had no military, no weapons, and no allies. In another day or two, he would have enough slaves to fill 3 transport ships. His second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Korvac, walked up to him with a data pad. "Sir, we intercepted a distress signal from the planet before we destroyed their communications," Korvac said. "It was broadcast on multiple frequencies." Reyes laughed. "Let them call for help. This sector is empty except for a few trading posts and mining stations. Nobody will risk a war with the Empire for a world full of farmers." "Should we be concerned about intervention?" Korvac asked. "From who?" Reyes waved his hand dismissively. "The Galactic Council talks about peace, but does nothing. The Trade Federation only cares about profit. We have conquered 17 worlds in this sector, and nobody has tried to stop us yet." Korvac nodded and walked away, but something bothered him. In all his years of military service, he had learned that underestimating unknown factors was dangerous. The distress signal had been sent on frequencies used by long-range exploration ships. What if someone had heard it? What if they decided to investigate? He pushed the thought away. Even if another species did show up, the Vorthak fleet was strong. 12 warships against whatever outdated patrol craft might wander into the system. The Empire had not built its reputation by running from fights. Deep in space, far beyond the Villani system, a massive ship moved through the darkness between stars. Its hull was gray and scarred from countless battles. Strange symbols marked its sides, and weapon ports lined its flanks like the teeth of some metal predator. On the bridge, Admiral Marcus Webb studied a holographic display showing star charts and signal intercepts. His face was hard and weathered, marked with scars from old battles. His crew worked quietly around him, professionals who had seen too much war and death. Lieutenant Commander Elena Vasquez walked up to him carrying a data tablet. Her expression was grim. "Admiral, we've confirmed the source of that distress signal," she said. "It's from a world called Villani Prime, agricultural colony, population around 3 million. All peaceful civilians." Webb nodded slowly. "And the attackers?" "Vorthak Empire. Same group that hit the colonies in the Kepler sector last month. They specialize in slave raids on defenseless worlds." Webb's jaw tightened. He had seen the aftermath of Vorthak raids before. Entire populations vanished, taken to work in mines and factories until they died from exhaustion. Children separated from parents. Families destroyed forever. "How long until we reach their system?" he asked. 18 hours at maximum burn, sir." Webb turned to his communications officer. "Send a message to the fleet. All ships are to prepare for combat operations, and send a priority signal to Terran Command. Tell them we may need reinforcements." As the great ship turned toward the Villani system, its engines began to glow brighter. In the depths of space, humanity was coming, and they were not coming to talk. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Villani system like 3 metal wolves emerging from a dark forest. Admiral Webb stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the tactical display update with new information. What he saw made his blood run cold. Villani Prime hung in space like a wounded animal. Smoke and fire marked its surface where cities once stood. Orbital bombardment had turned green farmland into burning wastelands. Above the planet, 12 Vorthak Warships moved in a slow patrol pattern, their weapons still hot from destroying everything the peaceful farmers had built. "Dr. Chen, what do you make of this?" Webb asked the ship's xenobiologist. Dr. Alexis Chen studied the intercepted Vorthak communications with growing anger. She was a small woman with kind eyes, but those eyes now burned with fury as she translated, "The alien transmissions." "They're discussing harvest quotas, Admiral," she said, her voice tight with controlled rage. "They've already captured approximately 200,000 Volani civilians. The rest are hiding in underground shelters while the Vorthak decide whether to capture them or just eliminate them as too much trouble." Webb's scarred hands gripped the railing harder. "What's their timeline?" "They plan to finish loading the transport ships within 24 hours. After that, they'll either enslave the remaining population or sterilize the planet's surface to prevent future resistance." Lieutenant Commander Vasquez looked up from her sensor station. "Admiral, we're detecting massive underground bunker systems across the planet. Looks like the Volani built them for natural disasters, not warfare. There could be millions of people down there." Webb nodded grimly. The peaceful farmers had never imagined they would need to hide from alien slavers. Their shelters were designed for storms and earthquakes, not orbital bombardment. "Sir," called the communications officer, "the Vorthak fleet is hailing us. Put them on screen." The view screen flickered to life, showing a tall alien in elaborate armor. Captain Reyes' red eyes gleamed with arrogance as he looked at the human bridge. His translator device gave his voice a mechanical quality that somehow made his words even more threatening. "Unknown vessels, you have entered territory claimed by the Vorthak Empire," Reyes said. "State your business or depart immediately." Webb stepped forward, his face calm, but his eyes deadly cold. "This is Admiral Marcus Webb of the Terran Federation. You are attacking a peaceful world and enslaving innocent civilians. Withdraw your forces immediately." Reyes laughed, a sound like metal scraping against stone. "Terran Federation? I have never heard of this insignificant species. You have 3 small ships against my entire fleet. Leave now, or I will add your crew to my slave collection." "I'm giving you one chance to do this the easy way," Webb said quietly. "Stop your attack, release your prisoners, and leave this system. This is your only warning." The Vorthak captain's laughter grew louder. "You dare threaten the Empire? My ship alone carries more firepower than your entire primitive fleet. Perhaps I will keep you alive long enough to watch your homeworld burn." Webb's expression didn't change. "I tried to be reasonable. Remember that." The connection ended, and the bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of electronics. Webb turned to his tactical officer. "Commander Morrison, signal the fleet. All ships, battle stations. Prepare to engage." On the planet's surface, deep beneath, the ruins of what had once been the capital city, Kiraveltos sat with the other survivors in their underground shelter. The air was stale and hot, filled with the quiet sounds of frightened people trying to stay brave. Young Zolan Thames had volunteered to maintain watch at one of the surface access points. He was barely 18, with the strong hands of someone who had spent his life working the soil. Now he crouched behind rubble and broken concrete, using a pair of old binoculars to watch the sky. "Kira," he called down through the access tunnel. "Something's happening up here." She climbed the ladder, carefully, her injured arm still weak from the explosion at the communications center. When she reached the surface, Zolan handed her the binoculars and pointed toward the stars. 3 new ships hung in space above them, smaller than the Vorthak vessels, but somehow more dangerous looking. Their hulls were gray and angular, covered with what looked like weapon systems. Even at this distance, she could tell they were different from anything she had ever seen. "Who are they?" Zolan whispered. Before Kira could answer, the space battle began. Captain Reyes had been in dozens of battles during his career with the Empire. He understood tactics, firepower, and the mathematics of warfare. When the 3 unknown ships began, Their attack? He was confident in his victory. 12 against 3 were excellent odds. That confidence lasted exactly 47 seconds. The lead human ship, the destroyer UES Vengeance, came at the Vorthak formation like a metal comet. Commander Jake Morrison, a veteran pilot with ice water in his veins, brought his ship in fast and low, using the planet's gravity well to build up speed that should have been impossible for such a large vessel. The Vorthak opened fire with their standard energy weapons, beams of concentrated plasma that could melt through most known armor. The human ships absorbed the hits and kept coming. Then they returned fire. The railguns were the first surprise. Chunks of metal accelerated to incredible speeds by magnetic fields hit the Vorthak ships like the fist of an angry god. Shields that could stop energy weapons were useless against solid projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed. The plasma cannons came next, weapons that turned parts of space itself into a burning hell. Vorthak ships that had survived hundreds of battles were cut in half by weapons they didn't understand. But the nuclear torpedoes were the real shock. "What in the name of the dark stars are those?" Korvac shouted as he watched weapon signatures. "Unlike anything in their databases?" "I don't know," Reyes replied, but his voice had lost its arrogant confidence. 2 of his ships were already dead, and a third was venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches. "How are they generating this much destructive force?" The answer would have terrified him even more. Humans had spent centuries perfecting the art of killing each other on a world where everything was already trying to kill them. Their weapons weren't elegant or efficient by galactic standards. They were just overwhelmingly, brutally effective. Commander. Morrison's ship completed its attack run and came around for another pass. Behind him, the other human vessels moved in coordination that spoke of years of training and combat experience. They fought like a pack of predators, covering each other's movements and striking at weak points with surgical precision. On Valani Prime, Kira and Zolan watched in amazement as burning debris from Vorthak ships streaked across the sky like falling stars. The massive alien vessels that had seemed so invincible were being torn apart by the smaller human craft. "Who are these people?" Zolan asked in wonder. As if in answer to his question, the communication system in their shelter crackled to life. A human voice, speaking in accented but clear galactic standard, filled the underground chamber. "This is Admiral Marcus Webb of the Terran Federation calling Valani Prime. Your distress signal was received. We're here to help. Please respond if you can hear this message." Kira ran back down into the shelter so fast she nearly fell off the ladder. With shaking hands, she grabbed the emergency radio they had salvaged from the ruins. "This is Kira Veltos on Valani Prime," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "We hear you. There are millions of us hiding underground. The aliens have captured hundreds of thousands more. Please, can you really help us?" Webb's voice came back immediately, steady and reassuring. "We're going to get your people back, Miss Veltos. Hold your positions and stay underground until we signal all clear. The cavalry has arrived." But even as hope bloomed in the hearts of the Valani survivors, Admiral Webb was studying his long-range sensors with growing concern. "Lieutenant Commander, Vasquez had just handed him a report that changed everything." "Sir, we're detecting a massive hyperspace signature approaching from the inner systems," she said quietly. 53 ships, including what appears to be a Vorthak Empire flagship. "They'll be here in less than 6 hours." Webb looked at the tactical display, where his 3 ships were still engaged with the remaining Vorthak vessels. They had won this battle, but the war was just beginning. "Send a priority message to Terran Command," he ordered. "Tell them we need the entire Third Fleet here immediately, and send word to the Galactic Council. It's time they learned what happens when someone threatens innocent people while humans are watching." As the space battle continued above Valani Prime, War Marshal Krutz Vorthak sat on the bridge of his flagship, studying the reports from Captain Reyes with growing interest. These unknown aliens had destroyed half of Reyes' fleet with only 3 ships. That suggested technology and tactics worth studying. More importantly, it suggested a challenge. The Vorthak Empire had built its reputation on being the strongest predators in this part of the galaxy. If these humans thought they could interfere with Imperial business, they were about to learn a very painful lesson about the natural order of things. "Prepare the fleet for battle," Krutz ordered his officers, "and send word to High Command. We may have found our next target for conquest." War Marshal Krutz. Vorthak arrived at Vellani Prime with the confidence of a predator who had never met his match. His flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds, was twice the size of any human vessel, bristling with enough firepower to crack open planets. Behind him came 52 more ships, the pride of the Vorthak Empire's war fleet. On the bridge of his massive dreadnought, Krutz studied the tactical reports from Captain Reyes' surviving ships. The humans had been clever, using the planet's gravity and asteroid field to their advantage. But cleverness only worked when you weren't completely outnumbered. "Sub-Commander Vex," he called to his tactical officer, a scarred veteran who had helped conquer a dozen worlds. "What do you make of these human weapons?" Vex looked up from his analysis console, his red eyes glowing with interest. "Primitive, but effective, War Marshal. They use kinetic projectiles and nuclear fusion devices. Very crude compared to our plasma technology, but the raw destructive power is impressive. And their ship designs. Built for war, sir. Heavy armor, redundant, systems, and weapon emplacements covering every angle. These are not exploration vessels or trading ships. These are dedicated warships." Krutz nodded thoughtfully. Most species in the galaxy built ships for multiple purposes because war was expensive and rare. But these humans seem to build their vessels with only one goal in mind, killing their enemies as efficiently as possible. "Interesting," he mused. "I want to capture some of them alive for questioning. Find out where they come from." On the human side of the battle line, Admiral Webb was coordinating the most desperate holding action of his military career. His 3 ships faced impossible odds, but retreat was not an option. Millions of innocent lives hung in the balance. Below them. "Admiral," Lieutenant Commander Vasquez reported, "the Vorthak fleet is taking position in a standard battle formation. They're not trying to be clever. They think they can just overwhelm us with numbers." Webb studied the tactical display. The enemy ships were arranging themselves in 3 waves, with the massive flagship at the center of the formation. It was a textbook approach for a fleet that expected easy victory. "They've never fought humans before," Webb said quietly. "They don't understand what they're dealing with." Dr. Chen looked up from her xenobiology station. "Admiral, I've been studying their formation and communication patterns. The Vorthak are used to fighting species that use similar tactics to their own. Standoff engagements, formal battle lines, weapons exchanges at long range. And we don't fight that way," Webb finished for her. "No, sir. Human naval doctrine is based on centuries of warfare on Earth's oceans, modified for 3-dimensional space combat. We use mobility, surprise, and concentrated firepower to destroy enemy vessels before they can respond effectively." The communications officer interrupted. "Sir, the Vorthak fleet is hailing us." "Put them through." War Marshal Krutz's image appeared on the view screen. He was larger than Captain Reyes, with more elaborate armor and decorations that spoke of high rank. His voice carried the absolute confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. "I am War Marshal Krutz of the Vorthak Empire," he announced. "You have interfered with Imperial business and destroyed Imperial vessels. Surrender now, and I will allow your crews to serve as slaves rather than dying in the void." Admiral Webb stepped forward, his weathered face calm. "This is Admiral Marcus Webb of the Terran Federation. You are engaged in the systematic enslavement and murder of innocent civilians. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Krutz laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "You have 3 ships, human. I have 53. Your species clearly lacks basic mathematical skills along with military sense. This is your last chance to surrender." "We've faced worse odds," Webb replied. "And we're still here." The connection ended, and Webb turned to his crew. The men and women around him had served together for years, fighting pirates and raiders across the outer territories. They had seen entire colonies wiped out by various alien threats. None of them were about to let it happen again. "All ships, this is Admiral Webb," he announced over the fleet communications. "We are outnumbered 17 to 1. The enemy has superior numbers and firepower. By all conventional military analysis, we should retreat and wait for reinforcements." He paused, looking around at the faces of his bridge crew. "But there are 3 million innocent people on the planet below us, and help is still hours away. So we're going to do what humans do best. We're going to make them pay for every meter of space, every second of time, and every life they try to take. All ships, attack pattern Delta 7, maximum burn. Show them why Earth is classified as a death world." The human ships moved forward in a formation that made no sense to Vorthak tactical doctrine. Instead of staying together in a defensive formation, they spread out wide and came at the enemy fleet from 3 different angles. Commander Morrison's destroyer dove toward the planet's upper atmosphere, using the gravity well to build up incredible speed. The second human ship, the cruiser UES Defiance, commanded by Captain Lisa Torres, swung wide around the asteroid field, using the floating rocks as cover from enemy sensors. The third vessel, Admiral Webb's flagship, came straight up the middle in what appeared to be a suicidal charge. "They're splitting their forces," Sub-Commander Vex reported to War Marshal Krutz. "This makes no tactical sense. We can destroy them individually instead of having to face their combined firepower. Proceed with the attack," Krutz ordered. "But remember, I want some of them taken alive." The Vorthak fleet opened fire with everything they had. Plasma beams and particle cannons lit up space like a deadly light show. The humans should have been vaporized instantly. Instead, they danced between the incoming fire like ghosts, their ships moving in patterns that seemed to ignore the basic laws of physics. Admiral Webb's flagship spun on its axis while maintaining forward momentum, presenting its heavily armored sides to incoming fire, while its weapon systems targeted specific weak points on enemy vessels. The return fire was devastating. Human railguns sent streams of metal projectiles into the Vorthak formation at velocities that made them nearly impossible to track. Nuclear torpedoes detonated between enemy ships, the expanding fireballs catching multiple targets in their deadly embrace. Commander Morrison's destroyer completed its atmospheric dive and came screaming up from the planet's surface, his ship glowing white-hot from atmospheric friction. He hit the rear of the Vorthak formation like a missile, his weapons tearing through ships that had no idea he was coming. "Impossible," Krutz muttered as he watched 3 more of his vessels explode. "How are they moving like that?" The answer was training, experience, and the simple fact that humans had been fighting 3-dimensional battles in the air and underwater for centuries before they ever reached space. While most galactic species thought of space combat in terms of traditional naval engagements, humans had learned to fight in all 3 dimensions simultaneously. On Villani Prime, the survivors watched the battle through whatever sensors and scopes they could salvage. The sky above them was filled with explosions and burning ships, most of them Vorthak vessels. Kira Veltos had established contact with other survivor groups across the planet. The human admiral had given them a secure communication frequency, and now reports were coming in from underground shelters worldwide. Sector 7 reports they can see human ships engaging the enemy directly above their position, reported Jorik, from his shelter near the northern continent. Western settlements are seeing massive explosions in orbit, added Mira from her group's hiding place. The aliens' big ships are taking heavy damage. Young Zolan Thames was still at his observation post, watching the battle through his salvaged binoculars. "Kira, you need to see this," he called down. "One of the human ships just took out 4 alien vessels in a single attack run." But even as hope grew among the Villani survivors, Admiral Webb knew the truth. His ships were performing beyond expectations. but they couldn't keep this up forever. The Vorthak fleet was adapting to human tactics, and weight of numbers was beginning to tell. "Damage report," he called out as his flagship shook from a direct hit. "Armor breach on deck 7 through 9, Lieutenant Commander Vasquez reported. "Shield generators are at 60% capacity. We've got casualties in engineering." Webb looked at the tactical display. They had destroyed or disabled nearly 20 Vorthak ships, but more than 30 remained operational. His own small fleet was taking damage faster than they could repair it. "Sir," called the communications officer, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the edge of the system." "Put it through." A new voice filled the bridge, strong and confident. "Admiral Webb, this is Fleet Admiral Catherine Stone aboard. UES Devastator. Third Fleet has arrived and is moving to engage. Recommend you withdraw to safe distance and let us handle this." Webb looked at his tactical display and smiled for the first time in hours. At the edge of the system, massive hyperspace signatures were resolving into the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. 60 ships of the Terran Federation Third Fleet, including 3 dreadnoughts and the massive flagship UES Devastator. "Negative. Admiral Stone," Webb replied. "We've got them right where we want them. Request permission to continue engagement." Stone's laughter came over the communication system. "Permission granted, Admiral. All ships of Third Fleet, this is Admiral Stone. We have Vorthak Imperial vessels engaged in the enslavement of innocent civilians. You know the drill. No survivors among the slavers, but protect any prisoners you find." War Marshal Krutz watched his tactical display as 60 new contacts appeared at the edge of his sensor range. His confidence began to waver for the first time in his military career. "Sub-Commander Vex," he said quietly, "how many human ships are out there now?" Vex checked his instruments twice before answering. 63 total, War Marshal, including several vessels larger than our own flagship." Krutz looked at the tactical display, where his once mighty fleet was now outnumbered nearly 2 to 1. For the first time in his career, he began to consider the possibility that the Vorthak Empire might not be the apex predators of the galaxy. "Signal the fleet," he ordered, "prepare for fighting withdrawal, and send an emergency transmission to High Command. Tell them we need to know everything about these humans. Everything." Fleet Admiral Catherine Stone stood on the bridge of the UES Devastator, watching her tactical display with the calm precision of someone who had fought in more space battles than most species could imagine. The massive dreadnought was the pride of the Terran fleet, bristling with enough firepower to level continents. Around her, 60 more human warships moved in perfect formation toward the Vorthak fleet. "Analysis of enemy formation," she ordered. Her tactical officer, Commander David Kim. "The Vorthak are attempting a fighting withdrawal, Admiral," Kim reported. "Their flagship is moving toward the outer system, while their smaller vessels provide cover. Standard Imperial doctrine for when they're outnumbered," Stone nodded. She had studied Vorthak tactics for years, ever since the first reports of their slave raids reached Terran command. The Empire was militarily competent, but they relied too heavily on intimidation and overwhelming force. When faced with equal or superior numbers, they usually retreated to fight another day. "Not this time," she said quietly. "Signal all ships. Implement Formation Omega. We're going to make sure they never threaten innocent people again." On Valani Prime, Major Sarah, Kim led her Special Forces team through the ruins of what had once been the planet's capital city. The Vorthak had established temporary holding facilities here, massive cages where they kept captured Valani before loading them onto transport ships. Sarah's job was to locate and secure these facilities before the aliens could execute their prisoners out of spite. Her team moved through the rubble with practiced efficiency. Sergeant First Class David Park took point, his enhanced sensors scanning for both Vorthak patrols and human life signs. Behind him, Corporal Maria Santos carried the heavy communication equipment that would coordinate with the fleet above. "Major, I'm reading approximately 3,000 human life signs in the structure ahead," Park reported through the team's encrypted communication system. Also detecting Vorthak energy signatures. Looks like they've got guards. Sarah studied the tactical display on her wrist computer. The building had been a sports stadium before the invasion. Now it was a prison camp, surrounded by armed aliens who would probably kill their captives rather than let them be rescued. "Santos, patch me through to Admiral Stone," she ordered. The connection crackled with static from the ongoing space battle above, but the Admiral's voice came through clearly. "Go ahead, Major." "We've located a major prisoner holding facility, Admiral, requesting immediate air support for prisoner extraction." "Negative, Major. All atmospheric craft are engaged with enemy air defenses. You'll have to handle this one, on the ground." Sarah looked at her team. 12 soldiers against an unknown number of Vorthak guards, with 3,000 innocent lives hanging in the balance. The math was terrible, but the mission was clear. "Copy that, Admiral." "We'll get it done." She switched to the team frequency. "Listen up, people. We've got civilians in there who are counting on us. We go in fast, we go in hard, and we don't leave anyone behind. Standard hostage rescue protocol, but remember, these aren't human terrorists. These are aliens who see us as nothing more than animals. They won't hesitate to kill prisoners just to hurt us." The team moved into position around the stadium. Through their scopes, they could see Vorthak guards patrolling the perimeter. The aliens were tall and heavily armored, carrying energy weapons that could cut through most known materials. But Sarah's team had advantages the Vorthak didn't expect. "Overwatch, this is Alpha Team," she called to the human observation post they had established on a nearby hill. "We're beginning assault on the prisoner facility. Copy, Alpha Team. You've got eyes on you. Good hunting." The attack began with silent precision. Sergeant Park used his enhanced suit systems to disable the perimeter sensors, while Corporal Santos took out the communication array with a focused electromagnetic pulse. By the time the Vorthak realized they were under attack, half their guards were already down. Sarah's team moved through the stadium like ghosts, their adaptive camouflage systems making them nearly invisible to alien sensors. The Vorthak were good soldiers, but they were used to fighting other species that used similar tactics and technology. They had never faced humans before, and the difference showed. Inside the stadium, the captured Villani huddled together in fear, as the sounds of battle echoed through the structure. They had been prisoners for days, watching their friends and family members dragged away to the transport ships. Most of them had given up hope of rescue. Then the door to their holding area exploded inward, and a figure in advanced military armor stepped through the smoke. "This is Major Sarah Kim of the Terran Federation," the human said, her voice carrying clearly through her suit's external speakers. "We're here to get you home." An elderly Villani named Nex looked up at her with tears in his eyes. "Are you real, or are we dreaming?" Sarah pulled off her helmet, showing a human face marked with determination and compassion. "We're real, sir. Your people sent out a distress call, and we answered. Now let's get you out of here." As her team led the rescued Villani toward safety, Sarah could hear the space battle raging overhead. The sound of ship-to-ship combat was like continuous thunder, occasionally punctuated by the bright flashes of nuclear detonations. Above the planet, the space battle had evolved into something War Marshal Krutz had never experienced before. The human fleet moved like a single organism, each ship supporting the others in ways that seemed impossible. Their formations shifted and flowed like water, adapting to his tactics faster than his officers could respond. "War Marshal, we've lost." "Another 3 ships," Sub-Commander Vex reported, his voice tight with stress. "The humans are targeting our command vessels specifically. They're trying to disrupt our coordination." Krutz watched his tactical display with growing alarm. The human fleet had divided into multiple attack groups, each one led by a different class of warship. The massive dreadnoughts provided heavy firepower, while smaller cruisers and destroyers darted between his ships like metal sharks, striking at weak points and vulnerable systems. "How are they coordinating this?" he demanded. Their communication. Signals are encrypted beyond our ability to decode. The answer was centuries of human military doctrine. Where other species relied on rigid command structures and formal battle plans, human naval tactics emphasized flexibility and initiative. Each ship captain was trained to think independently while working toward common objectives. The result was a fighting force that could adapt to changing circumstances faster than any centralized command system. Captain Lisa Rodriguez commanded the carrier UES Liberty, which had deployed squadrons of fighters in attack patterns the Vorthak had never seen before. Her pilots, led by flight leader Tom Nakamura, used atmospheric entry tactics that turned the planet's gravity well into a weapon. "Ghost Squadron, this is Liberty Control," Rodriguez called to her fighters. "Begin attack run Charlie 7. Use the planet's upper atmosphere to mask your approach." Nakamura's voice crackled back over the communication system. "Copy, Liberty. Ghost Squadron beginning atmospheric dive." The human fighters dove toward Volani Prime's surface, their hulls glowing. From atmospheric friction to Vorthak sensors, they appeared to be burning up during re-entry. Only when they pulled out of their dives and came screaming back into space did the aliens realize what was happening. The fighters struck the Vorthak formation from below, hitting ships that had positioned themselves to defend against attacks from the plane of the solar system. Their weapons, designed for close-range combat, tore through alien hulls that were never meant to face such concentrated firepower at point-blank range. "Impossible," Krutz muttered as he watched 3 more of his ships explode. "They're using the planet itself as a tactical element." Sub-Commander Vex looked up from his sensor station with an expression of growing fear. "War Marshal, I'm detecting multiple human boarding pods approaching our position. They're planning to take our ship intact." Krutz's red eyes blazed with fury. No alien species had ever dared to board a Vorthak flagship. The very idea was an insult to everything the Empire represented. "All security teams to repel boarders," he ordered. "Show these humans what happens when they dare to set foot on an Imperial vessel." But the human boarding parties were unlike anything the Vorthak had ever faced. Led by Sergeant First Class David Park's brother, Lieutenant Commander James Park, the Marine assault teams cut through the flagship's hull with weapons that turned solid metal into vapor. The Vorthak security forces were skilled fighters, but they were trained for formal military engagements. The humans fought like something wild and dangerous, using every dirty trick they had learned during centuries of warfare on a planet that was actively trying to kill them. "They're not following any recognized combat doctrine," one Vorthak officer reported to Krutz. "They're fighting like animals." "Like predators," Krutz corrected quietly. For the first time in his long military career, he was beginning to understand that the Vorthak Empire might not be at the top of the galactic food chain after all. On the planet's surface, Kira Veltos and the other survivors watched the sky with amazement and growing hope. The space battle was clearly turning in favor of the humans. Burning Vorthak ships fell from orbit like metal meteors, while human vessels continued their deadly dance around the alien fleet. Young Zolan Thames had established contact with other survivor groups across the planet. His communication equipment, salvaged from various sources, allowed him to coordinate with resistance cells that were beginning to emerge from their hiding places. Sector 12 reports that human soldiers have rescued over 5,000 prisoners from a Vorthak holding facility, he reported to Kira. The aliens were planning to execute them before retreating. Kira felt tears of relief running down her face. After days of hopelessness, after watching her world burn and her people enslaved, help had finally arrived. And it hadn't come in the form of diplomats or peacekeepers. It had come as warriors who were willing to fight and die for people they had never met. "Who are these humans?" she asked Zolan. "Why would they risk so much for strangers?" The answer came from her radio as Admiral Stone's voice broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Fleet Admiral Catherine Stone of the Terran Federation to all Volani survivors. Your world sent out a call for help, and we answered because that's what decent people do. No innocent world should face extinction alone. War Marshal Kreutz made his final desperate decision as his flagship shuddered under human weapons fire. With most of his fleet destroyed or disabled, with human marines fighting through his ship's corridors, he had only one card left to play. "All remaining ships, target the planet's surface," he ordered. "If we cannot have the slaves, then no one can." It was a move born of spite and cruelty. If the Vorthak Empire couldn't profit from Volani Prime, then they would make sure it was worthless to everyone else. The surviving alien ships began to target the planet's cities and refugee centers. But Admiral Stone had anticipated this possibility. "All ships, implement defensive formation Sigma. Protect the planet at all costs." The human fleet moved between the Vorthak ships and Volani Prime, their own hulls absorbing weapons fire meant for the innocent civilians below. Ship after ship took damage to protect people they had never met, following a military doctrine that placed the protection of innocent life above their own survival. Lieutenant Commander James Park's Marines finally reached the bridge of the Vorthak flagship. War Marshal Kreutz stood surrounded by his remaining officers, his elaborate armor scorched and damaged from the fighting. "Surrender," Park ordered, his weapon trained on the alien commander. "Your fleet is destroyed, your ship is captured, and your war is over." Kreutz looked around at the human soldiers who had invaded his bridge. They were smaller than Vorthak warriors, but there was something in their eyes that made him take a step backward. These weren't just soldiers. They were something far more dangerous. "What are you?" he asked quietly. Park's smile was cold and sharp. "We're from Earth, and Earth doesn't forget when someone hurts innocent people." 6 months after the Battle of Volani Prime, the galaxy was a very different place. The Vorthak Empire, which had terrorized peaceful worlds for decades, no longer existed. Their slave camps had been liberated, their war fleets scattered or destroyed, and their leadership either dead or imprisoned, awaiting trial for crimes against sentient life. War Marshal Kreutz sat in a detention cell aboard the human prison ship, UES Justice, staring at the wall and trying to understand what had happened to his empire. The cell was clean and well lit, with basic amenities that were far better than what the Vorthak had provided their own slaves. Even in captivity, the humans treated their prisoners with more dignity than his people had shown their victims. Lieutenant. Commander James Park visited him regularly, not for interrogation, but simply to talk. It was a human custom that Kreutz found both puzzling and disturbing. Why would his captors care about his thoughts or feelings? "Your species confuses me," Kreutz said during one of these visits. "You fight like savage beasts, but you treat prisoners like honored guests. You show mercy to enemies who would have enslaved your children. Why?" Park sat across from him, his expression thoughtful. "Because that's what separates us from you. We don't fight because we enjoy it. We fight because sometimes violence is the only language that bullies understand." "But you could have simply destroyed our ships and left," Kreutz pressed. "Instead, you hunt down every Vorthak military installation in this sector. You free slaves on worlds we conquered years ago. You spend resources and risk lives for people who can give you nothing in return." Park leaned forward. "That's where—" "You're wrong. They give us something very valuable in return." "What?" "The knowledge that we did the right thing. On Volani Prime, the reconstruction was proceeding faster than anyone had dared hope. Human engineering teams worked alongside Volani, builders to repair the damage from the Vorthak bombardment. The planet's cities were being rebuilt stronger than before, with defensive systems that would make any future invasion costly for the attackers. Kira Veltos now served as the planetary ambassador to the newly formed Galactic Protection Accord, an alliance of worlds committed to mutual defense against threats like the Vorthak Empire. Her office was in the new capital city, built where the old communication center had once stood. She often thought about that desperate night when she had sent her message to the stars, never really believing that anyone would hear it or care enough to respond. Now her world was part of something larger, protected by a fleet of human warships that patrolled the sector and responded to distress calls from other threatened worlds. Young Zolan Thames had joined the Galactic Defense Corps, a new military organization, trained by human instructors but composed of volunteers from dozens of species. He wore the uniform proudly, knowing that he was part of something that would ensure no other world would suffer as Valani Prime had suffered. "The humans taught us something important," he told a group of new recruits during a training exercise. "Peace isn't the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of justice, and sometimes justice requires people who are willing to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves." Dr. Alexis Chen had become something of a celebrity in xenobiological circles for her groundbreaking study titled Predator Psychology: Why Earthborn Species Excel at Warfare. The paper explained to the galaxy why humans were so effective in combat, despite lacking the advanced technology or physical advantages of other species. Humans evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them, she explained to a gathering of galactic scientists. Their entire evolutionary history is one of survival against impossible odds. When other species developed technology to overcome their environment, humans developed the ability to overcome anything that threatened them. But that still doesn't explain their tactical superiority, argued a Altarian researcher. Many species have evolved from predator backgrounds. Chen smiled. Yes, but humans are persistence hunters. They don't give up. Ever. When a human military force commits to protecting something, they will fight until they win or until they're all dead. Most species calculate acceptable losses and retreat when the cost becomes too high. Humans just keep fighting. Admiral Marcus Webb had been promoted to Fleet Admiral and now commanded the entire Outer Rim Defense Force. His flagship, the newly constructed UES Retribution 2, was twice the size of his original vessel and served as the mobile command center for human peacekeeping operations throughout the sector. He stood on his bridge, looking at a star chart that showed the locations of human patrol fleets across dozens of star systems. Each red dot represented a world that had sent out a distress call and received a response. Each blue dot showed a former Vorthak slave world that was now rebuilding under human protection. "Admiral," Lieutenant Commander Vasquez reported, "we're receiving a distress signal from the Kepler sector. A species called the Rillen are under attack by pirates using captured Vorthak equipment." Webb nodded. "Signal the Fourth Fleet. Tell Admiral Torres to respond immediately. And send a message. To the Rillen, tell them help is on the way." As the great ship turned toward the Kepler sector, Webb reflected on how much had changed since that first desperate message from Valani Prime. The galaxy had learned that there were people willing to fight for justice, willing to risk everything, to protect the innocent. And predators throughout the galaxy had learned to fear the sight of human ships dropping out of hyperspace. Fleet Admiral Catherine Stone had retired from active military service to become the first director of the Interspecies Defense Academy, a training facility where officers from dozens of worlds learned human military tactics and philosophy. The Academy's motto, carved in stone above the main entrance, read simply, "No one fights alone." Her first graduation ceremony was attended by representatives from over 100 worlds. Students from peaceful species that had never known war stood alongside veterans of conflicts across the galaxy. What united them was a simple understanding that freedom and peace were not natural states of the universe, but precious things that had to be protected by those willing to fight for them. "Today you become guardians," Stone told the graduating class. "Not conquerors, not subjugators, but protectors of those who cannot protect themselves. You carry with you the hopes of every peaceful world in the galaxy." In the audience, Kira, Veltos wiped tears from her eyes as she watched Zolan Thames receive his commission as a lieutenant in the Defense Corps. The young farmer who had once watched helplessly as his world burned now wore the uniform of an organization dedicated to ensuring that no other world would suffer the same fate. After the ceremony, she met with Admiral Webb for their regular consultation on galactic security matters. The old warrior looked tired, but satisfied as he reviewed reports from across the sector. "How many worlds have we liberated now?" Kira asked. 43 former slave worlds, plus another 68 that have joined the Protection Accord, Webb replied. But it's not just about the numbers. It's about the message we're sending. What message is that? Webb looked out the window at the Academy's training grounds, where students from dozens of species practiced combat maneuvers together. That bullies don't get to win anymore. That there are people watching, people who care, and people who will come when you call for help. Across the galaxy, the story of Valani Prime had become legend. Peaceful worlds told their children about the farmers who sent a message to the stars and the warriors who answered. Military academies studied the battle as an example of how superior tactics and determination could overcome numerical disadvantage. Philosophers debated the ethics of intervention and the responsibility of powerful species to protect weaker ones. But perhaps the most important change was simpler and more practical. Throughout the galaxy, worlds that had never imagined they could defend themselves began to build their own defense forces. Species that had accepted subjugation as inevitable started to fight back against their oppressors. The example of humanity had shown them that predators were not invincible, that courage and determination could triumph over brute force. On a distant world in the Outer Rim, a young communications officer named Tara Helios watched her planet's first line of defense ships launch from newly constructed orbital platforms. Her world had been threatened by raiders just months ago, but the attack had been driven off by a combined force of human and local vessels. As she monitored the communication channels, she heard the familiar words that had become a beacon of hope throughout the galaxy. This is the Terran Defense Force responding to your distress call. We're on our way. She smiled and opened her own communication channel. This is Helios Prime Defense Command. We copy your transmission, Terran Defense Force. But we've got this one covered. Thanks for teaching us how to fight back. The response came back immediately, filled with warmth and pride. Copy that, Helios Prime. Good hunting. And in the depths of space, human ships continued their endless patrol, ready to respond when peaceful worlds called for help. Because the galaxy had learned an important lesson from the Battle of Valani Prime. When Deathworlders answer your call for help, they don't just bring aid. They bring the absolute certainty that evil will not be allowed to triumph, that innocent people will be protected, and that no one has to face the darkness alone. The stars were no longer cold and empty. They were filled with guardians, watching and waiting, ready to answer the call when someone sent an SOS to the stars. And when they came with firepower, determination, and the unshakable belief that every life in the galaxy was worth protecting.